Hey guys, sorry for the long wait between videos. Life has been interesting at the moment, to say the least, but without further ado, I'll get straight into it. Oh, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Now, I was thoroughly lost in this plethora of books. So many stories and perspectives to learn. Actually, your timing, it's rather impeccable, really. Would you like me to share a story with you? One about the power of the moon? You see, recently, I was strolling through the library and I came across some books I didn't recognize. Now, you might be aware that we do have the magical technology to record text, but conjuring a book out of nowhere from nothing, well, that's quite astonishing. I just finished reading this one. I thought you might find it enlightening. This man, Plato, he describes a concept I think you might find very interesting. He actually reminds me a lot of Count Ymir. He would often waffle on about these microcosms and macrocosms. And I quote, "Thus, then, in accordance with the likely account, we must declare that this cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature, endowed with a soul and reason, a living creature, one and visible, containing within itself all the living creatures which are by nature akin to itself." Isn't that sublime? He seems to be referring to a cosmos as a single living organism that possesses a soul and intelligence. He goes on to describe that what I would guess he's referring to as the greater will in this context, as the demiurge, a divine craftsman which creates the universe by imposing order on pre-existing chaotic matter. This creation is not via eternal matter, but rather by a process of organizing the cosmos according to eternal forms, which are perfect, immutable archetypes of all things. Plato further explains that this world soul is a mixture of the same and the different, a unity of opposites, woven together to form a unified, harmonious entity. This soul permeates the entire cosmos, endowing it with life and intelligence. The world soul is responsible for the rational structure of the universe, ensuring that everything functions according to the divine plan. The rational pattern of the cosmos is expressed through mathematical principles and Pythagorean ratios, reflecting the deep connection between mathematics and the structure of reality. Wait, Tarnished, doesn't this sound familiar and similar to the Golden Order Principia? Have you read it? I think most scholars would be familiar with it by now. The law of causality and regression? In fact, I came across an interesting crossbow design related to this just the other day. It does seem that causality and regression has something to do with mathematics at least. Quite curious. Wow, there really is a lot more here that I'd love to discuss with you, but I want to talk about another book that I found and a concept that it mentions. Okay, so it's from a strange language called Latin, where they refer to a concept of coincidentia oppositorum, or the unity of opposites. Now, Tarnished, I'm only able to read this with my magical abilities, but it goes on to talk about Mircea Eliade, a 20th century historian of religion, used this term consistently and extensively in his essays about myths and rituals. Describing the coincidentia oppositorum as the mythical pattern. Gosh, that year can't be right, can it, Tarnished? Anyway, according to the famous alchemist Gerard Dorn, the highest grade of alchemical union of opposites consisted of the union of the total man with the world soul. Wait, that's what Plato was talking about, wasn't it? Only when the opposites are in balance is unity made manifest. It is this stable tension between opposites, and in fact, the opposites presuppose one another, analytically so. Their unity is that either one exists because the opposite is necessary for the existence of the other. One manifests immediately with the other. It could not have any identity whatsoever if not for its opposite. This is the oneness that is seen in all aspects of creation. Tarnished, is anything I'm saying making any sense? I'm not even so sure myself, but let us press on. Now, how do we apply what we've learned to what we know about our world, Tarnished? Well, what was it you were saying before? That you met a girl named Hyeta? Or you think maybe Irina? Show me again what you wrote down after she proclaimed the words of the three fingers. Okay, so we start with a oneness, like Plato was talking about earlier. That makes sense to me. Then from there, we get fractures. So what would the first fracture be? Well, Tarnished, I believe that the ancient artifact, the Swords of Light and Darkness, hold a clue that you mentioned earlier. This is somewhat speculative, but I feel as though these items imply the interaction between light and darkness is what gives the world form. The language of the two fingers is made of light and is described as formless, as it isn't interacting with its opposite. So I would posit that the first fracture was into light and dark. Ymir always said to me that his helmet represented the lightless abyss of the greater will, and I think this is what he meant. The duality of light implies the darkness. If we consider the abyssal serpent for a moment, if you will, it is said to be shorn of light. I believe this fracture was what shorn it of its light, it coming to reside in the lightless abyss that formed as a result. I think this initial fracture created two things: the causality of the first action, or the dependent origination, which I went over in my last chat with you, and this led to subsequent fractures that created other dualities. But specifically, I believe the first fracture led the greater will to split into masculine, creative energy and static feminine energy. I want to note, Tarnished, this is completely symbolic. This isn't meant to say anything about men and women in their day-to-day. Ymir did used to say he wanted to be a mother, actually, but I never knew what he meant until now. I think that this split of masculine and feminine was created by a simple thing: the realization that the one great desired anything at all, and thus desired order. This duality defines all of creation, giving birth to other dualities like form and the lack of it, masculine and feminine, the sun and the moon, births and deaths. You know, what Ymir mentioned to you last time you saw him is quite interesting, really, if we take this into consideration. From the interaction of light and dark, we get form, and then the matter which makes up the universe, and the consciousness of the residents of the lands between is forged in these stars, given life by the primeval current which flows from the lightless abyss of the greater will. This is why when one looks into the abyss, all one sees is endless darkness. And this is the structure of the body of the greater will. That is why all things are his children, because we are all made up of his fractured body and soul. Now, you mentioned that you encountered a strange being called Meta and another one called the Elden Beast, and they had a strange hue of gold and silver respectively. What if metaphorically, Meta is the daughter of the greater will, in that her creation was born out of the union between masculine and feminine aspects of creation, and the fracturing of these led it to be broken into the astral and solar aspects, or Meta and the Elden Beast respectively. You know, my old friend Muriel used to say to me when I asked him to teach me sorcery, "Heresy is not native to this world. It is but a contrivance. All things can be conjoined." I feel like, in a strange way, he's macrocosmically talking about the unity and the union of the moon and the greater will, or masculine and feminine, and this is represented by the marriage of Radagon and Renala. The house of Carian is often associated with intellect, and I want to say science. They literally observed the stars with scientific instruments. However, they also worshipped the moon in a religious sense. The Golden Order is associated with faith and is also a very scientific doctrine, associated with mathematics and physics. Their opposite duality manifests in their culture, both faith and intellect being required to form the true order, like we said at the start. I wonder if this works on another level, where the Ur-tree and Shadow-tree meant to represent this first fracturing coming back together, perfect spiral, the light and the dark, the masculine and feminine coming back together as one, and how this is broken. If Rani's ambitions, as you have told me, are to be true tarnished, it makes me wonder, is the dark moon a representative of the darkness and the night, and thus the feminine fractured half of the one great? For what other entity in the lands between has been shown to be potentially able to usher in an unstoppable new age, and a new order which usurps the previous one? The moon in this situation replaces the significance of the Elden Ring and the greater will entirely. Isn't it peculiar that the only possibilities for change in our world, and an order which replaces the previous one, is a union of consort associated with faith and one of intellect? Mikola and Radahn themselves reflect this dichotomy, and Mikola himself intends to usher in a new foundation of order, as per the circlet of light that you showed me. This is quite a lot to ponder, Tarnish, but I think you can maybe see where I'm going with this. Thanks guys, this video is a bit of an experiment with a new type of video, as you can probably tell. It was definitely inspired by Jack the Mimic's Carian Tutor series, and as always, remember to embrace the whole of it.